And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore, where we never sit out. We are your hosts, ND and CD. What is going on today? Today's kind of a special episode. Here's why. We did not actually come up with this video idea. CD and I did not. We had talked about things like this before, like comes up in conversation, casual group chat messages. But Jacob from Greenwich, Connecticut. And again, we've mentioned this before. We hadn't gotten a lot of questions recently, but guess what? Jacob from Greenwich, Connecticut, send us a message in the email, theredshirtsophomore@gmail.com. You guys can make sure to send us an email there or send us a DM on Twitter at theredshirtsoft. That's just at theredshirtsoft. And you can get your questions in, on the future episode, you might be featured, just like Jacob. Jacob from Greenwich, Connecticut says, "What up, boys? I was just wondering who you thought some of the best coordinator hires were from this year's cycle. P.S. Love the content and just know that I won't be sitting out this year either." Well, Jacob, we appreciate the sentiment. We appreciate the question because we're going to make an entire video based on that. An entire video. So, CD, how you feeling about this one today?
I'm excited. Like Matthew said, thanks, Jacob, for your question. Obviously, very excited to get into it. Um, yeah, there was a huge, obviously, we did a ton on coaching changes. We did every single head coaching change, and there were so many, right? I mean, uh,
30
just
plus.
it was crazy. It was awesome to really deep dive in, but a lot of coordinator changes happened too, not just at these new places, like we'll get into with Colin Klein and Joe Rossi, but you've got other guys that are moving over and trying to revitalize, revamp these head coaches to it. Maybe got into a stall, or maybe need some big time changes. And these are programs that are like massive, massive college football contending programs. They're going to see some changes within their coaching tree.
Absolutely. And did we get to every single coordinator? No, right? We wanted to highlight some ones that we wanted to talk about specifically. It doesn't mean like we're not going to talk about Chip Kelly today. All right. Obviously, he's one of the better offensive coordinator hires in the entire country, but we already talked about him a little bit. We're trying to talk about some people that, you know, maybe have gotten some light, but maybe not enough. Or, hey, we're going to revisit these guys. Like, what about these guys is making us revisit them? And, some other questions that we have arising from these as well, because these aren't all perfect. These all won't work out, by the way. But we're excited about each and every single one of these. We got 8 guys today. 8. I think that's a pretty good number. Solid 8. But
Absolutely.
again,
And
yeah,
a
CD.
lot of this too is like maybe like a lot has happened in the last month, 3 months, 4 months, maybe since we talked about these initial hires, and obviously everything with the greater landscape of college athletics, but even within the transfer portal, college regulations, EA college football 25, NCAA 25 is coming out too. Maybe you're excited about that. But these are guys that we want to be, oh, like it comes to August, late August, early September, you're like, oh, wait, Blake Baker's the DC, not at Mizzou anymore. He's at LSU. And that's nice, like water cooler talk for you guys to have fun facts once we get into, preview season and all that. So
Absolutely. And look, if you have a defensive coordinator or an offensive coordinator that we missed, which, yeah, there are going to be some, okay? Let us know in the comments if you guys want us to talk about it or send in a mailbag question. Hey, Redshirt Sophomore, what do you guys think about this offensive coordinator hire? Boom. And you just might have a chance to be featured on an episode, just like our good friend Jacob here. So thank you, Jacob. And thank you, Jacob, for the subscription as well. If you guys are not subscribed, you should be, because guess what? We're at 312 right now. I mean, CD and I were in Italy for 2.5 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever. We were out of commission for like 17 days. 40 subscribers in that time. That's insane. Y'all are awesome. So keep it rolling. We appreciate you guys so much. We would not be doing this if we didn't have the positive reinforcement that we get from every time you guys hit that subscribe button. So thank you guys so much. Make sure you like the video as well. If you like the content, like the video. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're a subscriber, you know the rules. All right. That's just what it is. So thank you all so much. CD, are you ready to get into it?
let's do it.
Okay. Step one. Let's talk about Joe Rossi. Who is Joe Rossi? For those who don't know, Joe Rossi is the defensive coordinator at Michigan State now. And where was he at before, CD?
He was at the University of Minnesota, the Golden Gophers, my Golden Gophers. And let me tell you, man, Joe Rossi is an unbelievable defense coordinator. He is the best kept secret in college football. In my opinion, he was the guy that PJ Fleck, because of his tight relationship, was able to keep him there for so long. Notre Dame came a knocking. Other schools, Michigan looked into him at times. Like it was Joe Rossi was a hot commodity. All right, all throughout college football. Maybe in the shadows more so than in thrust into the light. But what he did when he took over in 2019 is he changed the course of PJ Fleck's tenure at Minnesota.
Yeah, and I do like to highlight like good coaches, right? And I will play a little bit of devil's advocate a little bit later, and I'm going to have you defend Joe Rossi because there are going to be people that are questioning this hire as well. I'm going to give you a chance to defend those comments, right? When he had really good talent on this team, on his teams, he found ways to utilize them to the best of their abilities, right? And he also did a really good job developing as well. Now, is there like a gigantic influx of NFL talent at Minnesota as there are some of these other schools? No, but these guys are getting developed and they're going to the league as these three stars coming in, right? Like Joe Rossi did a really good job for several years at Minnesota. Before that, he was at Rutgers, if you remember in 2014, 2015. I mean, it was Rutgers. You know, they had a good season with him there, I guess. They went like 8-5, but I don't know that his defenses were necessarily spectacular. And I think that's where some of the skepticism comes in, right? Because you go to a school like Minnesota and you like in 2019, right, was probably like their best team in, I mean, how many, what, 40 years plus? You look at this, that defensive team, that defense had a lot of talent on it, but they also gave up some points, you know? And part of that was the pace of the offense was a little bit different because they could throw the ball pretty effectively with Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman there at wide receiver. Does it concern you at all that, you know, Joe Rossi has been coaching a defense for a team that is very adept to running the ball a lot and effectively, thus slowing down the game and giving your team time to rest, you know, limiting the number of possessions for the other team? Like, does that, do you think that that should play a factor in anyone's thoughts on Joe Rossi? And I'll give you a chance to talk about that.
Well, yeah, I'll give you a couple other factors too in terms of pleading and making your case. There is that not only did they play in the Big Ten West, right, where it was not elite high flying offenses anywhere, right, throughout his tenure at Minnesota, but also the way the conservative nature, not only the offensive play calling, but the head coach decision making on third and fourth down was we're not going to turn the ball over. And if it's fourth and three on the 40-yard line, the opponent's 40-yard line, we're going to punt the ball and they're going to pin them deep and obviously give your defense nice cushion and ability to, really have the whole field and the bend but don't break. Obviously, with Joe Rossi, did very well at Minnesota. I think a lot of it, what I'll say in defense of Joe Rossi, a lot of it is your scheme fit. It's like what kind of players you have, your offense is, complementary football is a very important thing, something that Joe Rossi understands. And he did a really good job with PJ Fleck. Now, you did see at times where 2020, which I wouldn't even count, by the way, because Minnesota's, it was a mess, right? Not only everywhere in college football, but the COVID outbreaks, how young the team was, it did not look good. They could not tackle because they didn't practice tackling. It was a lot going on there at Minnesota for Joe Rossi. Yeah, I mean, those are valid concerns, and we'll see how they get addressed in this upcoming new Big Ten. And obviously with Michigan State, who I would say, by the way, in this year 2024, might have less talent than Minnesota might have this year or he's had in years past. Obviously, you lose guys like Simeon Barrow, Derek Harmon in this latest transfer portal, two Big Ten losses going to Miami and Oregon, respectively. But yeah, I do think the long term wise, I think Joe Ross is a fantastic hire. You're going to be able to bring in talent there for him with John Smith, the money they have at NIL, being in the Big Ten, all these things going for you at Michigan State. You've seen what they've done in the transfer portal at times this year, and I think it's only going to get better and better as Jonathan Smith gets there and gets acclimated to East Lansing. And I think once Joe Rossi does have that talent, he's a guy, like you said, can really take advantage of it, put guys in great spots, maximize these players that maybe, other coaches wouldn't get the best out of. I mean, you saw it. It was night and day. You go back to 2019, 2018, it was night and day compared when Minnesota, when Joe Rossi took over for the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
So let me ask you this as well. Michigan State, even in the Mel Tucker era, right, had a very tough time in their secondary. Okay. They adding a couple transfers in here. Like, is this something that you think Joe Rossi is going to immediately help improve, or do you think that this is going to take a couple years and requires a heck of a lot of talent acquisition?
Both. I would say both. I think what they did at Minnesota is they've had a pretty good secondary for a while now. You've seen a lot of good draft picks. I mean, Antoine Winfield, highest played DB in the history of the NFL. I mean, he was from Minnesota, Joe Rossi guy. Tyler Nubin got drafted this year. Terrell Howden a year ago. Terrell Smith as well. Or sorry, Jordan Howden. Terrell Howden, somebody else. Jordan Howden and Terrell Smith, both guys that drafted just a year ago. Yeah, there's a lot of talent that Minnesota's actually had underratedly in the secondary. I think part of it is the scheme fits. What Joe Rossi does is playing that, it's kind of like a 4-2-5 type thing. But also like not putting your secondary in vulnerable spots. They do a good job on first and second down to create opportunistic plays on third down, or where they don't have to blitz a ton of guys up front to where you're putting in your secondary in vulnerable spots. I think the talent and the coaching, two weak spots, two liabilities in the secondary for Michigan State, even though surprising that Mel Tucker would have that. But a couple years now, it was valid. It was really a concern. And I think I don't know about overnight. We'll see how it goes in year one. Obviously, Michigan State's got a lot of holes to fix. They get a nice transfer over from Arizona State at the end of this spring transfer cycle to play corner for them. But we'll see what happens. But I do think, like, in terms of changing the culture, what you're trying to do at Michigan State, you're trying to create physical players. You're trying to create a physical brand of football that Jonathan Smith's bringing over from, right, Corvallis over to the Big Ten. Joe Ross is a guy that understands the landscape of the Big Ten, like you mentioned, Rutgers and Minnesota, but also like building a culture, building a program. Yeah, I think all those things not going to see in year one, maybe not. And so don't write him off too early. Just as I would urge you not to write off Jonathan Smith too early. It's going to take some time there potentially. I have some patience with it. I do think this is a really nice hire. Minnesota fans were devastated, absolutely devastated. They know how lucky they've been to have Joe Rossi for that long. And the other Big Ten guys, you understand, like they're oh, this is a nice hire from Michigan State.
This isn't like the Kirk Shiraka hire though, right? For Rutgers. It's not like that's not these are not equivalent, right?
No,
These are not equivalent.
no, but I do think like you might see some struggles, just like Kirk Straka had with Rutgers. We'll see how he does this year,
Well,
reunited back with Ethan.
I mean,
But
Kirk
this is
Shiraga doesn't need help struggling. All right,
no.
that's one thing. So, but anyways, let me ask you this. So Joe Rossi had mentioned that Minnesota had been lucky to hold on to him for so long. Like, what other schools were interested in Joe Rossi these past couple years?
I mean, I don't know if he never ever got a job offer from Notre Dame, but I do know that was one that Minnesota schools were terrified. If that were the case, I know Wisconsin's obviously opened up. Um, but I don't know if he was ever really in the consideration there with Fickle bringing over, I believe, another Fickle. Notre Dame was the one that a lot of people were scared about. And that one, I think there was some fire there. I don't know if there was actual, a job offer, but I know that's something that Ross would be interested in, and that the fit seemed right there as well. But he's interesting. He's not a guy that really gets brought up for head coaching jobs much. I mean, Kenny Burns is a guy that went from the running back coach at Minnesota to the head coach at Kent State. Obviously, being in the MAC, Kent State's a different level of program than Michigan State or another Big Ten program. But yeah, I think a little bit surprising. I think a lot of Minnesota fans thought they survived the wave, and then obviously, December 14th hit, and Joe Rossi was named the head defensive coordinator and linebacker coach for Michigan State, and so obviously a little bit surprising. But yeah, once it kind of happened, it makes a lot of sense. So it makes a lot. He's getting a pay raise, and also like part of it was resetting the clock too. With PJ Fleck just came off a 5-7 year. Minnesota, they're not going to fire him by any means at all. But I do think that like they're going to have patience with Jonathan Smith. Maybe not quite the patience that PJ Fleck's going to get at Minnesota if things start to continue to turn, not in the best direction for that program.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Johnny Nansen from Arizona heading to Texas. And we talked about him a lot on this show during the regular season. And like, because, yeah, there's a lot of discussion about how Noah Fafita and Ted McMillan like ended up, really propelling that offense into a light that would allow this team to really shine. But I think that the story, I think, really should be about this defense. Like we knew that the offense was going to be good going into the season, but the defense, the improvement from when Johnny Nansen first came in, right, to this year, was it was it was a switch. He flipped it, right? 2021, before he was there, 101st in opponent points per game allowed. 2022, 126th in his first year as defensive coordinator. That's out of 133, by the way. Okay. This past year, they were a top 30 team in opponents' points per game. Their secondary was fantastic. Okay. And what's the story behind Johnny Nansen? Well, I mean, he's a fantastic recruiter. He worked at USC. He was at UCLA. I mean, he's kind of been all over there in the West Coast, kind of dipping his toes into a different state here. But look, I think this is a pretty solid replacement. What do you think?
Yeah, and there's familiarity there with Steve Sarkisian back all the way their days from when Sarkisian was at USC. Now, obviously, Sarkisian, much different person than he was, just 10 years ago. Obviously, building a really good program right now in Texas. And he goes out and gets his guy, a guy that he proclaimed one of the best, defensive coaches in the nation. And obviously, like you said, what he did with Arizona, nothing short of super, super impressive. Yes, Jacob Manu gets a lot of credit there, but their D line, I thought, was really, really impressive. And what they did, they lost a ton of guys to go to other Power Five schools, starters from just a year ago. And they came on this past season and really, really, was fantastic. Top 25 defense, stifling some really good offenses. Washington State was lighting up everybody. And until they ran into Arizona, I mean, they did a great, great job. What they did to UCLA and Chip Kelly was awesome. And obviously, yeah, you mentioned Nansen being at UCLA, USC. He's done recruiting there. It's fantastic. He can bring some talent, infuse some talent into that D line, what Texas has had. And they're doing a good job of that right now, I think, obviously. But you lose two guys in the NFL, two impact players in Sweat and Murphy, and you're going to have to replace them. And I do think it's going to be a nice piece for that. Now, he's working with the inside linebackers, obviously, but he's going to have a hand in a lot of different things, recruiting as well. And Anson's, I think, a great fit for Texas, especially you kind of had to do it late in the cycle. Once, what's his name, went to Nevada. Um, your defense corner left for Nevada to be their head coach, and
Right?
a great Jeff Choate, Jeff Choate,
Chip choke. Chip choke.
Choate.
You got it.
Sorry, there we go. But yeah, Nansen I think is fantastic. What about you?
Yeah, I think he's good too. And the quality of the player that he's brought in the transfer portal already, Trey Moore, Andrew
Yep.
Makuba. I mean, those aren't just your no-name guys, right? I mean, you look at you look at the transfer portal a lot of times like plugging holes, but like they really got some good talent in the transfer portal, at least in the top end, right? I mean, they only needed a couple different pieces. Of course, you lose some guys in the interior, and you do get a guy on the interior who's not going to replace the production of those two guys. But the reality is, though, Johnny Nansen is he's a darn good football coach, man. And Texas, with the loss of Jeff Choate, with the loss of Bo Davis, I mean, those are huge losses, right? And a huge reason why that Texas team was, I think, really good. Aside, people like to point at their offense and Quinn Ewers, yada yada yada. I think that defense was a lot different than the defense that we've been used to with these Texas teams. So the defense, not that it's a calling card for Texas, but there are some good offenses in the SEC that they're going to be playing against, and some very physical teams that they're going to be playing against, and they need to come ready to go. And I think Johnny Nansen can help them get ready. I mean, there's always question marks by year one because with that philosophy change, with all that comes in, all that comes with getting a new defensive coordinator, sure, but Johnny Nansen's really good, man, and we've been high on him for a while. So I think this was a really good hire.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Texas, like you said, they're going to be a team that's not only SEC, but this is national championship type of year with Quinn Ewers coming back, all the pieces you bring in the portal. You cannot afford to have a lackluster side of the football, and especially on that defensive side. Yeah, man. I mean, also, I mean, I just love the mentality that they played with. Arizona, man, they played so hard last year. They tackled well. They were physical. Everything you want to see for your Texas football, right? To get back, to get really back. Johnny Nansen is going to be able to help continue to push that and push that culture that Sarkisian is bringing. And that's part of the reason why they brought him in, right? You had that success. You had that crossover at USC. and Sarkisian understands exactly the type of person Johnny Nansen is and what he brings to the table, not only recruiting wise, but also like you said, scheme and culture wise. It's gonna be awesome. I know Arizona was pretty devastated to lose a guy like Johnny Nansen. Um, but I guess it is its nature of the beast, But yeah, and also yeah, what he did for Arizona, like you said, was just so
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Let's move on though. Let's talk about Blake Baker. Huh? Let's go to LSU. Matt House, previously at LSU, he's was shoved out the door. Okay. After the season that LSU had last year. Whether like it was I still have this debate in my head whether it was truly his fault or just like the way that they constructed that team, just it, there was not much he could do with that secondary. I mean, the misuse of Harold Perkins, I guess you could argue whether or not he was misused, which again, I'm not the biggest X's and O's guy. I couldn't tell you exactly what is best for Harold Perkins, but it feels like LSU's paying Blake Baker a lot of money. They're paying him $2.5 million, which is higher than any other defensive coordinator in college football. He's got experience. How do you feel about this hire?
I mean, you saw what he did for Missouri. I mean, they went 11-2. I mean, what they did to Ohio State, obviously, it was a much different Ohio State team than the regular season, but
Leaking Kleinholzer at quarterback.
that poor kid. I mean, they were opportunistic, right? They were good against the run. They got the pressure, a quarterback. I mean, they did a lot of good things. The Missouri was able to do. You got Darius Robinson, Tyron Hopper, Chris Abrams-Drain. Like you got some really good players there. Yeah, I mean, I, it's obviously a notable name, and I do think I like the culture he brings in. And not that I didn't like Matt House, but I think I obviously ran its course. You needed a change. That's unacceptable to be out of the top 100 in total defense, or 105th last year in total defense for Brian Kelly there in LSU. A change is needed. Blake Baker comes in. He's the hot name in the coordinator market. I don't know if the talent is there yet. I still don't know if I buy it, especially in that defensive backfield. Don't know. You're gonna need some young guys to step up and really step up for you. And I don't know if it's a good recipe for Blake Baker in year one, but I do think it's a nice change in the right direction. I think you can start recruiting and developing. You obviously missed on some evals last year, and you missed on a lot of evals in the transfer portal.
You meaning LSU,
That
not Blake Baker, of course.
correct. I'm sorry. Yeah, LSU did. So LSU obviously needed some kind of change there. Whatever they were doing wasn't quite working. Um, and we'll see what happens, this year. I mean, I think there's still high expectations for LSU football, like it should be every year. I mean, I'm high on Garrett Nussma. I know you're pretty high on him as well. The offense should be pretty good. We're the O line we love. Obviously, we did our video on that. We'll see how it works out with the defense there, talent wise. I mean, which is crazy to say that you have a talent problem on the defensive side in the defensive backfield at LSU. What a program people consider DBU, and it's kind of is that Matt House's fault? Is that a couple of the problems? But regardless, we'll see. We'll see. What do you think?
Well, you can ask UCLA, how do you fix a leaky secondary? Have a fantastic front seven. Blake Baker and the LSU Tigers, they go get Bo Davis from
Yeah.
Texas, and they're paying him $1.25 million to coach the line. Is he going to be a co-defensive coordinator or is he just going to be coaching defensive line? Either way, if you don't know who Bo Davis is, like we're talking like elite defensive line coach in the country, right? We're talking, I mean, the likes of like what David Turner. I mean, we're talking Bo Davis. I mean, like Bo Davis, he was at coach for Texas, obviously with Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy there. Coached the Lions for a number of years, UTSA, Jacksonville Jaguars, and then he also coached Alabama in 2014, 2015. Those teams, yeah, he coached Jaron Reed, Ashawn Robinson, Jonathan Allen, Dalvin Tomlinson, Deshaun Hand, Deron Payne, kind of like the golden era of Alabama defensive linemen was bred by Bo Davis. So I'm very confident that Bo Davis can, you also get some Dominic McKinley is coming in there at LSU. Young 5-star defensive lineman. Like you're gonna have talent in there, I believe. Even though you're losing Mekhi Wingo and Mason Smith, I still believe that Bo Davis is gonna find, acquire, and develop talent. I have to believe that. I have to. So I think like part of the biggest part of this Blake Baker hire was also getting Bo Davis.
Yeah, and I throw Corey Raymond in there as well. He's a guy that bring back from Florida. DB's coach, obviously, very big need. Ever since he left, he had some leaky secondaries there. Like you said, best way to fix leaky secondary. If you don't have talent in there, it doesn't matter how good the coaching is. You're going to good front seven. And obviously, Bo Davis, Blake Baker, very custom. They understand that uh, in the SEC. Bo Davis, obviously, those Bama teams, Bo Davis, those are some of the best D lines I've seen, period, at Bama, which is saying something. I mean, those guys, you mentioned a bunch of draft picks, a bunch of starters in the NFL. For Alabama, that's the exciting part here with Blake Baker is not only the commitment to Blake Baker going and giving him a massive raise he couldn't say no to from Missouri, but then also, yeah, we're going to commit to bringing in Bo Davis. We're going to bring in Corey Raymond back. A lot of other things that you like to see from Brian Kelly in this program are kind of understanding this was a big need. We had a Heisman Trophy quarterback, and we were not even close to winning the SEC West. So, yeah, I think it's pretty exciting for LSU. I mean, I do think I'm still going to be hesitant on them until I hear a little bit more about fall camp and how that's going with the secondary there. And we'll see what Corey Raymond can do over the summer and getting these guys ready to play SEC football. But yeah, do you think like does this change? Like you think if LSU ran with Matt House right for another year, do you think that would have been a death sentence for Brian Kelly, or you think not necessarily a death sentence, but just a bad idea? Or do you feel like these changes were necessary? You think this is encouraging for the program? Like what's your thoughts on that?
I I felt and I'm not as plugged into the LSU program as, y'all fans there, but I didn't necessarily see like I saw the talent in the secondary was just a problem and injuries and just misevaluation. Yeah, part of that is on Matt House, but I do think Matt House isn't terrible, right? And part of the reason why I took LSU to not only I had them not only win the SEC, but I also had them having a legit shot to win the national championship. I think I put some long ball shots on that. And if you would have told me that, yeah, like you said, they had a Heisman winning quarterback, I would have been like, wow. So I
Cash.
just cashed plus 2,100 national champion, but it's not how it worked out. I don't know. It was interesting. I do think some of the flaws, though, like, yeah, sure, Mekhi Wingo was hurt for a period of time, but I mean, him and Mason Smith were each averaging like 50 snaps a game. I don't know if that's exactly what you wanted. Like that first Florida State game, dude. Yeah, Mekhi Wingo dominated the first half, but he was gassed. He was gassed by the end of it. Yeah, and I know Jordan Jefferson got snaps in there as well, but I don't know. I thought there was some flaw in the rotations, and I could be totally wrong about that. Uh, but just from my observations, it felt like they kind of slowed down in the fourth quarter, which is interesting for a Tommy Moffitt team. You wouldn't have thought that, and that's another aspect to too. Tommy Moffitt not being there anymore, strength coach. But uh, I do think overall this change will improve. Was it necessary? I'll say yes. I guess you needed to see some change. I think Brian Kelly was pretty fed up with that. But do I think Blake Baker was necessarily the guy? I don't know. I think he's a really good hire. And I think if you can get Bo Davis there, I still think it's good. I mean, Blake Baker's he's had some solid defenses in his past. 1 year, top 25 defense in Miami, opponent points per game. They were basically a top 25 team in opponent points per game. Uh, this past year with Missouri, right on the fringe, not exactly top 25, but that doesn't tell the whole story. But it's a fine hire. I think it's pretty good. One of the better defensive coordinator hires. I mean, there's a reason he's getting paid $2.5 billion. So I I I gotta believe that they're at least trying to do something to get in the right direction and kind of right this ship. Because look, I mean, the Nick Saban era is over. It's over. So there's a lot of pressure for these SEC teams to kind of step up right now. Like you need to step up, and think LSU can do that for sure. Will it be this year? I don't know. But Blake Baker, I think is probably a step in the right direction. So sorry for
Yeah,
that
and
long-winded answer.
no, you're good. I think it's nice that he's been to LSU before, and obviously I think that was before Brian Kelly was there um, in 2021. But regardless, he's got ties to the state. Recruiting, obviously, he's done that all over the Southeast, which is important for you. Obviously, um, you have to recruit to get better talent, and I think Blake Baker understands that. And I hope that fans maybe give him a little bit of leeway in year one, and then really see how it goes in year two. We'll see how it works. Obviously, I get that you don't have a ton of patience, as you shouldn't at LSU. The expectations should be really really high for a program like that. Like you said, I think it's good to hire. We'll see if it works out. I don't know if I wish I could know. I wish I could look in a crystal ball and tell you, but I think there are a lot of factors here. Everything I've seen so far, I like, but we'll see what exactly goes on um, in the summer months and fall camp for the results in the 2024 season.
Let's move on. Let's talk about Dan Lin at USC heading over by way of UCLA. He's not gonna have to move his house, which is pretty nice. Just going from one LA school to the other. Look, USC, it is no secret, and we've talked about Dan Lin before, right? This is not something new, right? I think this is kind of like one of the bigger hires in the offseason for sure. Yeah, we're gonna put him on this list. Of course. He was unbelievable at UCLA. It's unbelievable. And the reality was too, it's like you look at the USC and the UCLA defenses and you notice a huge difference. One team was a lot more physical than the other. And that team was UCLA. That team was coached by Dan Lin. So I there's already talent at on this USC defense, some, but can you maximize it? Can you get these guys to buy in? Can you scheme these guys in good positions and really make use of their talents? I don't know, but I think Dan Lin was a great hire because you know that you had to get rid of Alex Grinch. You know you had to. I think Dan Lin was a fantastic hire, and you didn't have to go far to get him.
No, he understands the recruiting landscape. He understands the LA market. He understands, and you ever see you're both moving from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. Obviously, be to change type of there, but I think he also understands, you know, what needs to be changed here at USC, and I don't think he takes the job if he didn't really believe in what he was preached to by Lincoln Riley, that the culture is changing, that they're putting emphasis on defense, that this, and that need to happen in order for him to even have a chance to come in there and do it. Obviously, you love his the bloodlines. Obviously, Anthony Lynn, his father, head coach for the Chargers a couple years ago, very good defensive mind there. He's got NFL experience. Obviously, once he went to the UCLA, he obviously fantastic job, like you said, Latu among others, and a year where UCLA had just a lackluster offense, very very lackluster. You had a head coach that was pretty much checked out at the door in Chip Kelly, and you were over there running your side of the football and doing a damn good job, especially against the run, which USC needs help in. 69 yards per
Bad.
game. 69 yards per game for UCLA. That's incredible. 2.3 yards per rush. 3.4 sacks per game. Not yes, you have Latu to help with that sack number, but regardless of it's team effort, that's fundamentals, that's coaching, understanding who you're playing, things that seem to be missing under Lincoln Riley for a while now, and you need it more than ever. And by the way, not only we mentioned with Bo Davis and Corey Raymond to throw that in the Blake Davis, the Blake Baker hire, but let's throw Matt Entz in the Danton Lynn hire. That's a guy that comes over,
Yeah.
head football coach from North Dakota State, 86% winning percentage, two national two national championships. Yeah, I mean, unbelievable. 32-7 in league play. I love it. I think that's an absolute commitment to running the program the right way and understanding that the defensive philosophy needed a change. What say you?
Dude, I'm 100% in agreement with you. And like to touch on the rushing stats, for comparison, USC was giving up almost 5 yards per carry. over 185 yards per game, both in the bottom quartile of all of college football. It's terrible. That's terrible, man. And you brought in some transfers that you really thought were going to be some nice talent, and you had some linebackers that you brought in there as well. You're like, wow, we have some talent in this front seven, and it just did not work, man. It just did not work. I don't know, like, yeah, we talk about the mentality aspect of it, but and I don't know enough about scheme, but it feels like Grinch, he was just never good. Like he just was never good. It felt like he never put anyone in a good position. So I'm just maybe I'm spewing, but like I don't think it's a secret that this is a gigantic upgrade. So I'm all in on this hire. I think it was really good. Even just as valuable as it was getting D'Anton, it's also stealing D'Anton from UCLA. Like that's a big deal. Like not only is it like haha, like who's the premier program in Los Angeles, but this is another member of their coaching staff that UCLA doesn't have. And it's an in-state rival. It's now a conference rival heading to the new conference. Like there's levels to this that, you got to score it, almost even you want to evaluate a coaching hire based on how good the coach is, but there are layers to this, and it's really nice added extra piece of cheese there between your two patties and your double cheeseburger.
Yeah, Deshaun Foster would have loved to have a guy like D'Anton Lynn on his staff in year one, and obviously a lot of changes needed at UCLA, but D'Anton Lynn was the one of the bright spots there, and then I'm sure uh, UCLA fans are like pretty upset about. I love yeah, you brought that up. That's fantastic. Kick your rival while they're down. Um, do you so? I guess here's what I'm saying. It's like I feel like there's a little bit of a different tone when we're talking about Danton Lynn and USC and Blake Baker and LSU, both programs, elite offenses, very good, well respected coaches, talented teams, high expectations. What's the disconnect there? Obviously, Danton Lynn, we saw maybe yes, maybe he's a little bit better coach than Blake Baker. Who knows? You could be picking straws there. But and if you ask me, like Lynn might even have more of a job to do at UCLA, USC, and Baker does at LSU. What's the difference there? Like Lynn, we're super confident in. I guess maybe not what's the difference, but like Lynn, we feel good. What is going to take a year? Going to take 2 years? Is it going to just flip a switch and the talent in the room is just going to obviously rise to the top? What's gonna happen here the next couple of years for USC? And like, why are you so confident in this hire, or why do you like
You
this
know,
hire?
the Blake Baker versus D'Anton Lynn is a very good point. Like if someone was to approach me like, "Hey, why do you like Dan Lynn so much more than Blake Baker?" By the way, I like Blake Baker. Like that whole last segment that we had about him, like that wasn't to hate on Blake Baker, but I've honestly been playing devil's advocate for all these guys. So uh, but I think the level that D'Anton Lynn was able to elevate his team versus Blake Baker, like it was two different levels, right? It was a top 5 defense, top 10 defense versus a fringe top 25, top 30 defense. Okay. And you could argue that the Pac 12 was one of the best offensive team or offensive conferences in the entire country, right? Like, and now could you say, I had someone bring this up with me too. It's like, oh, we're Pac 12 quarterbacks so good because the Pac 12 secondaries were so bad. It was like, maybe, maybe, but UCLA secondary wasn't that great, and they still had success. And like,
Ask NFL GMs. Ask NFL GMs what you think
oh
about the Pac-12 quarterbacks. We saw 3 of them go in the top 12.
yeah, so I'm of the perspective, yeah, Blake Baker was coaching the SEC. Yeah, he elevated his team. Yeah, he did pretty well against Georgia, like actually solidly well until Carson Beck put his wiener on the table, which who called it? But that's for another time. Anyways, yeah, so I think it's very recency bias, right? There's a lot of recency bias involved in that. So yeah, so if someone's going to criticize me for, hey, if you like D'Anton Lynn, how could you not like Blake Baker as much? I respect that argument, and I'm not going to like backlash you for having that take at all. But this is definitely a feel thing and also recency bias, which is a huge thing in any kind of coaching hire system, right? Like when we talk about like yeah, we really try to like put ourselves in the shoes of these schools in the positions, and we try to talk about fit, and we try to talk about success and all that, right? But like recency bias is a real thing, right? I was just looking at a head coaching rankings heading in 2024 by College Football News. Uh, Pete Fiudak does a great job over there. Definitely should check him out. But he had Jed Fish ranked 38th and then Mike Elko 44th, right? And you're like, there's a huge level of recency bias there if you're going to put Jed Fish over Mike Elko, right? So, which is understandable too, though. Like, I mean, Jed Fish was fantastic at Arizona. Like he honest like we talk about Mike Elko not doing like doing more with less. Like Jed Fish did the same exact thing, but I think it's just it's preference, it's recency bias, it's feel, it's fit. Uh, the other thing is, yeah, D'Anthony Lynn knows the market. He's there. He's already on the recruiting trails. He's recruiting the same exact players geographically that he was before. Like, I mean, to a degree, Blake Baker was as well, but I don't know. And who knows? Like neither of those could work out for either team, but I don't know. I'm a big we're a fan of both. I mean, they're in this video, so good luck to those
Obviously,
guys.
I do think part of it too is just USC. While there is super high standards, I do think their over under win total is 7.5, and like that's not way less than a 9.5 for LSU in terms of expectations of college football playoffs. USC is replacing a lot more, so just Caleb Williams and some other pieces there, Marshawn Lloyd and some others. But I, I think Lynn, what he can do there is I think he's going to be able to build the program the right way and not kind of be rushed into, needing to win for expectations in year one. Now, year two is a different story, obviously. Um, with USC, they're going to expect to compete, obviously, as they should. I mean, you're paying Lincoln Riley, Dan Lynn a lot of money. So we'll see here. But I was just very, very impressed with this hire for USC. I mean, I feel confident in that it's going to work, and that this is a change, a commitment, and I keep using that word commitment by Lincoln Riley to defense and to winning national title and to competing in the Big Ten and all that good stuff that they should be doing, obviously.
Agreed, 100%. Let's move on. Let's talk about Andy Kotelnicki, dog, offensive coordinator now at Penn State. Previously was the offensive coordinator at Kansas. Um, yeah, and look, if you are tuned in for the falls, right, you may know of Andy Kotelnicki, like and his work at Kansas. But let's just say whatever you think it is so much more impressive than anything you could possibly imagine. Kansas was in the last 2 years a top 20 offense. In both years that he was there, they ran the ball at like a top 15 level with awesome, awesome concepts, getting their linemen in space, giving their running backs gigantic holes, utilizing the talent that they have on their team. It was unbelievable. And their defenses have stunk. And they've made bowl games both years. And that is not normal for this Kansas teams. Like they're not. It is now. Here's the drawback, right? Is a lot of this having to do with Lance Leipold? Potentially. Potentially. That's always the drawback. You have this really great coordinator, and you're like, wait, but they played for head coach that like is really good at what he does. So there's some checks and balances there, but you have to admit that this was a home run hire. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, and it not only, yeah, I love this hire. This is a hire that, I mean, James Franklin, Penn State's gotten a lot of criticism for having stagnant offenses, not explosive, shying away from big moments and all that good stuff. To me, I think a lot of people see this and like, oh, very good hire. Oh, Drew Lar is going to take the next step. He's going to be a first round pick. He's going to be this and Heisman contender. And while maybe that happens, but I think if that happens, the reason is because how explosive and how effective they're going to be in the running game. You brought that up with Kansas and how they ran the ball. The concepts were unbelievable with Devin Neal and the quarterbacks there. I mean, what he can do. We talked about the running back room already with Kay Allen, Nick Singleton, all the guys there. I think you're going to have a pretty good O line this year. with a concept that they can do, get those guys in space, get them running downhill, and don't have it 3rd and 10, 3rd and 9 against Michigan, 3rd and 8 against Ohio State the whole time, and not have a chance to even convert that because you're just no running game, no threat there, and you're just gonna sit Drew Alar back and 5 wide and have no chance to protect 6 coming. And yeah, I mean, I think this is massive. Penn State's a team. Again, we talk about where like in the new landscape, yes, you move them out of the Big Ten East, which helps them. No Ohio State, no Michigan every year, but also with that 12-team playoffs, you expand that again. They're over on the win total is 9.5. You win 9, 10 games, you're gonna have a real chance to be in that playoff spot. And large part's going to be because of Andy Kotelicki and what he can do for that offense there. I think it's fantastic. I think it's well thought out by James Franklin, going and getting a guy that fits your scheme or that you can not necessarily fits your scheme, but can fit your offense and what you want to do, running the football, explosive plays, everything that you need to be a playoff contender and a serious playoff contender. Kotelicki provides.
Yeah, and you're like, if you're looking at Penn State from a macro perspective, right? Like this team, you're like, okay, maybe this offense, even last year, right? Like was helped out by this defense. Is this defense going to be as effective as it was last year? My answer to that is probably yes. Right? Probably yes.
Abdul
It's going to
Carter
be,
is going to be crazy.
yeah, what Danny does Sutton. I mean, you're looking at AJ Harris coming over there from Georgia. I mean, it's a
Zane Durant.
Saint
That
Durant.
class, that junior class they hit on, by the way. Now, Drew Alar is obviously the linchpin, but they have a ton of true juniors with a lot of experience.
Well, let's talk about Drew Alar for a second, okay? Penn State, offensively, was the best football team in the country taking care of the football through the air. What I mean by that, no interceptions for Mr. Drew Aller. Had hardly any. He takes care of the football. And yeah, some of that was a result of, sure they ran the ball a lot. I mean, they ran the ball at 53% clip, which is like sure top half in the country, but it's not like they ran the ball an absurd amount. That Indiana game, that was all Drew Alar. That was all him, like making big time throws in those situations. And eh, how good are the receivers going to be this year? I mean, we'll see. I mean, we'll see. Julian Fleming could potentially be kind of a boost there. Um, you got to think Tyler Warren's going to be pretty solid at tight end. Like, what are the options going to look like at receiver? I don't know. But the reality is, like, they're probably going to be better than what Kansas had. I mean, am I right in saying that? I mean, gosh, if you go back and watch that bowl game, how, who are they playing? Where
UNLV, right?
UNLV, Grim. Oh my gosh, he was open on every single damn play. It was crazy, man. But that was not the only team that did that. Like it was just explosive play after explosive play, scheming guys open,
Look
being
at what
effective
they
in the
did
run
to
game.
Illinois. Illinois had a damn good defense, and they just
I
they
mean,
they, just, they couldn't keep up.
underperformed a little bit, but your point is correct, right? Like Illinois, even that the defensive line, they were lost. They were lost. It's
Mhm.
crazy, man. And they did it with backup quarterbacks too, like true freshman walk-on quarterbacks. Like I think they barely lost to Texas Tech with like a true freshman walk-on.
Cole
Barely.
Ballard, yeah.
Cole Ballard. I mean, so if you, yeah, Lance Leipold, huge reason that this team was so successful offensively. This Kansas team, at least. We'll see. We'll see how much this loss actually means, right? We'll see. We'll see probably pretty early on. But I have a feeling that not that people are sleeping on Penn State, but I think people are forgetting how close Penn State is to actually being a legitimate national championship contender. Is that crazy?
No, I don't think so. And I'll throw one other curveball in here for you. How about the name Bo Pribula? Pribula? Right? He's a sneaky. He's a good athlete. I don't mean to say sneaky athlete. He's a really good athlete. And I think like not no, he's not Jalen Daniels. He's not quite as, you know, how do I put explosive and kind of crazy as Jason Bean is. But he's a guy that can do some really creative things for you. And a guy like Kotelnicki is creative enough to understand that you have to put him in the game. You can do things with him That obviously, Drew Lar's a good athlete. Obviously, not a great one. I don't want him running the ball all the time. But Bo Pribula can absolutely do that for you. I mean, he had 6 rushing touchdowns for you a year ago, which is pretty darn good. And obviously, the last staff got him involved because they thought he needed to. And I think the next one can absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Ready to move on? Let's talk about Elijah Robinson. Actually, a guy that was brought up on the show a couple times before. He's headed over to Syracuse by way of Texas A&M. Why is this important? Right? You're looking at his resume. If you're, I don't know, on a computer, you might be looking him up on Wikipedia and you're like, has this guy ever called a play on defense? I don't think he has, at least in college football. I don't think he has. It's like, why is this one of the best coordinator hires in this cycle to us, right? The reason is because of recruiting, right? In this business, talent acquisition is, I'm not going to say it's number one, but it is dang important. Talent acquisition is very important. And in Syracuse, you're looking at a team that in the last 2 years, zero players from the state of Pennsylvania. You're Syracuse in New York. Pennsylvania is a gold mine, and you're telling me you landed zero players in the state of Pennsylvania in the last 2 years? It's inexcusable. You know how many Elijah Robinson and Fran Brown have gotten just in the last couple months? Three already. We're a couple months into this thing. That's the kind of impact that Elijah Robinson has. Elijah Robinson was going into New Jersey. He was going into Pennsylvania. He was going into Washington, California, Louisiana. He was snagging players from all over the place, man. He is an elite recruiter. 2022, he won National Recruiter of the Year. Here's a list of some of the players that he's gotten: Walter Nolan, DJ Hicks, LT Overton, DeMarvin Leal, Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy. Oh, wait, that's now we're gonna get into the 4 stars. Like, and then you go down the list and you're like, this guy, you have to go down 25 players that he's recruited before you get to his first 3 star. So yeah, maybe he doesn't have a ton of experience calling defenses, okay? But in terms of talent acquisition, him and Fran Brown are going to be lethal. And Fran Brown, of course, was his good friend back. I believe they're both from New York or New Jersey, one of the two.
Which is
Either
part of the
way,
appeal to that, which makes it
yeah.
awesome that they're both back in there.
Yeah, it just like, so who knows if it's gonna work out, schematically, but you have to believe that a team like Syracuse, right? And with the way that college football is changing, right? Like you don't know what college football is gonna look like in 5 years, but I can tell you one thing, that today, tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 10 years ago, one of the most telling indicators of how successful a team is going to be is how well they acquire talent. And yeah, there are outliers, and I get it. You can tell me and look at me and be like, stars don't mean everything. Yes, I'm hearing what you're saying in that capacity, that, yeah, there are people that are overlooked, maybe people that are overlooked, but the reality is that there's a strong correlation between recruiting rankings and legitimate success in college football. And now success is relative, of course, but Syracuse could maybe take some steps that they haven't taken since the 90s, early 2000s, right? I mean, that we're talking kind of like historic precedents that this team could start setting in terms of, like, at least for the Syracuse team in this millennium, like it could get pretty nuts over there. So, um, people who don't believe in Elijah Robinson as a play caller, which, by the way, how could you or how could you not? He doesn't really have any experience, but the point is, this was a very good hire for Fran Brown and Syracuse.
Yeah, I'll say this too is that not only the players that you talked about that he's come in contact with, like elite recruiters, developer, all that good stuff that you want. But you want to talk about his coaching resume too, in terms of his network and who he has, worked with. Not like so he was back at Baylor and Temple. By the way, Temple up in Philadelphia with Matt Rule. He was at Penn State, like you mentioned, in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania as well. Matt Rule, Mike Elko. Like he's got, to me, I believe he's been around enough good minds that he can figure it out. Him and Fran Brown combined can figure it out and call defense. I think absolutely. And not only that, I mean, you're seeing immediate returns, immediate dividends. Look at their 2025 recruiting class. Yes, it's early. I know it's May. You'll be June. I get that. You have 19 guys committed. 19 guys at Syracuse and Fran Brown decided we're good enough to pull the trigger on and accept the commitment. That's
Some good
awesome.
players. Some
Some
good
good,
players
good
too.
players. And you're looking at New York, New Jersey, Reed from Pennsylvania, like you said, down in Texas, Connecticut, Georgia, Massachusetts. You're trying to take back the Northeast, like you said. Yeah. I, I mean, this is an exciting one. To me, because Syracuse, they're not expected to win the ACC or compete for a playoff. No, no, no. But I do think they can do some really fun things here over the next couple of years with Fran Brown. Why not? In an era where it's all about, not all about, but it's mainly about, like you said, recruiting prowess and gathering, evaluating, and recruiting talent. Why wouldn't you want to have Elijah Robinson and Fran Brown on your team? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely would. I think it could be very fun.
Yeah, look, and it sounds like I think with our tone that, if you've been watching the full video and you watched our video on Blake Baker and Dan Lynn, you're like, wait, are you higher on Elijah Robinson than you are on these other folks? Guys, if I was running a college football program like LSU, yeah, I would probably hire Blake Baker over Elijah Robinson. Okay. The point is, for Syracuse, this is a phenomenal hire, and it could send Syracuse through the ceiling, or what they thought their ceiling was, right, as a program.
Yeah, and also eh, like there's two ways to go about it. If you're Fran Brown, you could be conservative or you can get aggressive. A guy that you trust and know, Elijah Robinson, who has Northeast roots in Elijah Robinson, but also the upside is there. If he can call defense, bro, I mean, you're looking at massive, massive, you know, I don't want to call it like, out shooting yourself, out kicking your coverage type thing that Syracuse can steal for a couple of years or maybe even longer with Elijah Robinson. I mean, he's a loyal guy. Like you saw him, he followed Matt Rule. Right, Matt Rule left to the NFL. Like he went to A&M, right, and he was there for a long, long time. Was loyal to A&M, and then
Waiting for promotion,
waiting
never
for
got
promotion.
it.
Didn't quite get it. Ended up at Syracuse, where he probably had other jobs, absolutely, in the Southeast to be a D line coach, do whatever. But he wanted to be a defense coordinator. He wanted to follow Fran Brown. I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome. And you see they hit the ground running in 2025 class, and obviously with the portal class of 2024, getting Tom McCord, Savion Washington, guys like Deuce, Deuce Chestnut,
Yeah.
um, your guy from A&M, Phil Diggs. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah, I can tell you for a fact that Elijah Robinson, had he not gone to Syracuse, was going to be paid as a position coach, one of, if not the highest paid position coaches in all of college football. He was going to be paid handsomely. I'm saying he took a pay. I don't know if he took a pay cut or not at Syracuse. However, there was plenty of opportunity for him to stay at Texas A&M. He chose to go to Syracuse. He's excited. He's ready to prove himself. He's ready to take the next step. It's an exciting time for Syracuse fans. Let's move on. Let's talk about Colin Klein. Football fans, you guys are going to, of course, know Colin Klein is Heisman Trophy finalist at Kansas State as a quarterback, coached quarterback coach for Kansas State for a number of years, and then was the offensive coordinator there for 2 years at 34 years old. He had a season where he ranked 34th in points per game and 10th in points per game as an offense. Yeah, so some pretty dang good offenses there. He's headed over to College Station, Texas, to be coaching for Texas A&M with Mike Elko. Look, uh, you, I'm an Aggie. You couldn't tell. You were more excited about this hire than even I was. So I'm going to let you kind of talk about Colin Klein a little bit and why you think he's one of the best hires in college football in this past cycle.
Well, I think what he's done at the quarterback position for Kansas State has been awesome. I mean, not Skylar Thompson, the guy that got drafted in the NFL, Avery Johnson, the guy that he recruited, Will Johnson, the guy he developed, stuck with him, right? Like, and obviously what he did, Adrian Martinez, the guy that kind of revitalized his career, what he does running the football with his quarterbacks. And I think Wigman, he's got a great, great arm, but I do think he's pretty darn mobile. And I know he's been injury prone. I'm not injury prone, okay? In a
Just one
pretty
injury.
significant injury in his sophomore season, obviously. But I don't know if you want to hit taking all these hits, regardless. So you've got kind of depth there with Henderson and Reed. Anyways, I think it's really, really exciting. I like Bob Petrino, but obviously, like you needed to get away from Fisher, Jimmo Fisher, and obviously Mike Elko comes in, defensive guy. You believe in that side of the football is going to be fixed, not fixed, but going to be well-oiled machine, right? With Mike Elko. The offensive side, the offensive coordinator was a very important hire. Recruiting and developing and scheme, all very important, right? And I think Colin Klein, what he does in the running game, improving your O line, right? And what they can do in the ground and pound, taking advantage of some of your good running backs, but also obviously development of Connor Wickman is going to be the storyline, I think, this fall for the Aggies. What say you?
Well, the coaching staff around him is also fantastic, right? Holman Wiggins, Adam Cushing. So you really like the situation that he's in. You like the talent that's there. Now the question is that all Aggie fans have, okay, is what is this offensive line going to look like, right? And I can tell you that Colin Klein is going to make sure that this offensive line is better. If not, play to their skill set, right? And we saw Kansas State. Look, they do not have the biggest boys on the offensive line. Cooper Beebe isn't even. I don't think he's. Is he that big? I mean, he's wide, but he's not like long, and he just gets people moving. He gets defensive lines confused, right? I think in his scheme and his deceptiveness, his misdirections, I think it's going to open up a whole new can of worms for Texas A&M. I think he's going to enjoy having three different running backs with three different skill sets entirely. We'll see what he does on the offensive line. I mean, he's kind of trying everyone out everywhere. I think there's enough pieces. It's just how is he going to put it together, right? And he's going to have to work with Adam Cushion real hard on that one. But we'll see how it goes. I have a lot of faith in Colin Klein. I loved watching him, of course, as a kid. Uh, I say as a kid. I mean, it was like what 10 years ago, so I was a kid, I guess. But yeah, I love this hire, man. It was a really good hire. Now there's some other offensive coordinators out there that were really good as well that Texan would have liked to hire. Yeah, absolutely. But Colin Klein is, you know, a 450-foot home run and a 385-foot home run. They're home runs. Both of them are home runs. So I was a big fan of this hire, and I think, and of course, the rest of the coaches that Mike Elko put together. It's just there's just still a lot of questions, to be answered this fall, and I think the talent is there. So unlike some of these other guys, like Elijah Robinson, like Blake Baker, uh, like I don't know how many or Joe Rossi, like this offense is kind of ready to perform now, in a sense. Like, yeah, sure, there's improvement to be made talent wise, but down the road. But there are pieces there where, like, I think right away you're kind of gonna get a good picture if Colin Klein can kind of steer this thing in the right direction.
It's kind of just start the ignition and the pieces, like you said, the pieces are there. And what he did, I thought, really well at Kansas State was spread the football around. And like you said, how multiple he was running the football with different bodies. What he can do at A&M, you got three different running backs, you got a quarterback. I mean, he did similar thing at Kansas State where you had Giddens and Ward, two different body types. You got Will Howard and Avery Johnson, two different body types. You've got Ben Snoop, Philip Brooks, Chase Brown. Like you got all these guys that he did last year, and I would even argue that there's a lot more, significantly more talent on the A&M roster in the skill position than he's ever had. And I mean, you got 5, 6 wide receivers that you feel good about, right? And if you're A&M, you've got a couple tight ends you feel good about, a couple quarterbacks, couple running backs, like you mentioned. The O line, they'll get that. That'll be a whole different animal. But I just, are you excited to see the multiple uses what they can do? I mean, I feel like I've almost been frustrated with how like a guy like Moose Muhammad's been used in the past couple of years, where I mean, it feels like the offense was so stagnant and like not predictable. But I don't know. Are you expecting to see, you know, much different, quick uh, production and product on the field than it was with Jimbo Fisher?
There are weapons on this offense that can be, I say can be, superstars. They can be superstars. And I think Colin Klein gives him a really good chance to do just that. You look at a guy like Noah Thomas, two spring games in a row, 2 springs in a row, has been absolutely dominant, right? And he was really good in the season. Can he be a number one in the SEC, right? Can Moose Muhammad we have seen ridiculous flashes from Moose Muhammad in his time when he is playing. It is nuts. Is he going to get on the field? Is he going to stay on the field? Is he going to can he block, right? Like what are these? There's some really, really, really freaking good talent in the running back room, like I already mentioned. I mean, what are we talking about? Ruin Omens? I mean, you guys watched the spring game. I mean, Le'Veon Moss, you watched him last year. I mean, just run through people consistently. Amari Daniels is in there for shits and gigs. I mean, so I'm very high on Colin Klein. I do think that right away, I think you have a chance to see either something special, and just because they're not successful at the beginning doesn't mean that it won't work out, through the course of the season or a couple years, whatever. But I am saying right now that do not be surprised if something happens and something sparks early on because the talent is there.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is like there's if you tell me like you could name 2 to 3 players on this team and who leads the team in receptions or receiving yards, and like I wouldn't be surprised. And I think that's also the beauty of Colin Klein too, is like he doesn't care. He had a tight end leading him receiving last year. He had a running back was, their fourth best receiver. So like it's I think he just wants production, and I think he understands that. I mean, you remember you watch him play, he was gritty, gritty player for Kansas State and Bill
Oh
Snyder.
yeah.
Like it was awesome. And
Oh
I think
yeah.
his coaching style is a similar way where it's like, and I think A&M especially is going to appreciate that and love that, where it's like every week's a new player, right? Doesn't matter who it is. It's the name on the front is different than the name on the back, more important than the name on the back, obviously. And I think it's pretty exciting. That's why I love it there. Now, obviously, you mentioned there's other, coordinator hires that you could have had. Colin Klein, like I don't want to ask you to give a
Sure.
grade right now, obviously, because he hasn't even had a snap yet. It's been one spring. A lot has to happen. A lot has to change. But like in terms of, would you rather run it back with? You think it's a clear upgrade over Bobby Petrino?
I think it's a clear upgrade. I think it's a clear upgrade. So, but now, then again, Bob Petrino was running Jimbo's offense, and like Bob Petrino in interviews talked about, how the language of Jimbo's offense is very complicated, which for Bobby Petrino is a guy who's forgotten more football than probably almost anyone in college football has, learned. Like that's shocking. So I'm going to give Bobby Petrino the benefit of the doubt. I think he can do really well where he's at right now, but I do think that based on what we saw last year, if we have to go off something, right, I would say that you have to go off something, right? So I would say it's an upgrade based on what we saw last year. Again, recency bias, like we talk about, but it is what it is. Let's move
Last thing I
on.
do want to talk about
Oh,
real quick
sure.
though is the recruiting aspect to Colin Klein. Now, obviously, Kansas State, they're not a recruiting, national program, but they've done a good job there, bringing in some talent, identifying guys. Avery Johnson was a pretty high recruit as well. How do you feel? I mean, Husan Longstreet, big time get for you. I
Mm-hmm.
believe is that how I say the name? Husan Longstreet,
Yep. Yep.
5-star
Uh,
quarterback for you.
how about the
You
offensive
feel
line?
pretty good.
I mean,
Yeah.
you just got another one a couple hours ago. I mean, like as we're recording this on May 28th, I mean, there's so many offensive line pieces, right? Last year at the end of the year, you landed some receivers in the recruiting or in the recruiting trail late. Ashton Bethel Roman, you had Ernest Campbell, you had Isaiah Williams, you had I mean Terry Bussey. I mean he'll probably play DB, but like uh still I'm sure he was part of the conversations. When Terry Bussey was on visits and whatnot. But like just in general, I think Colin Klein's can be an effective recruiter. All right. He'll be fine. Let's move on. Let's talk about Travaris Robinson for Georgia. Now, he's getting paid $1.3 million. He's not even the highest paid coordinator on their or defensive coordinator on their team, right? That'd be belong to Glenn Schumann, right? Glenn Schumann was co-defensive coordinator with Will Muschamp last year. Of course, Will Muschamp, he steps down to an analyst role because he wants to spend time with his family. If you remember his kid, is I think he's playing quarterback at Vanderbilt or something. So he steps down, and Georgia uses this as an opportunity to not only hire a fantastic, coach, guy who's been proven as a position coach and as a defensive coordinator. You're gonna hire a guy and you're gonna steal him from Alabama. Travaris Robinson is one of the best defensive back coaches in the entire country. Am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely. Recruiter, developer, yeah, all that.
So a guy with SEC ties. I mean, Auburn, South Carolina. He was at Miami for a year. The Alabama cornerback coach. I'll give you a list of some names that he coached, right? And you can tell me, you can just get a hint right away, right? Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terran Arnold, Tyreek Stevenson, J.C. Horn, Cam Smith, Israel Mukwamu, Carlton Davis, Jonathan Jones, Jamel Dean. I mean, what? Like, I'm
I'd
sure
throw
that's not
Vernon
even.
Hargreaves in there too.
Yeah, that's. Wait, did he coach Bernard?
Yeah, he was at Florida in 2014. Vernon
That's
Hargreaves, Jalen
right.
Tabor. Wild, wild, wild,
That's
wild.
nuts, dude. Yeah, so that wasn't even, bro, kind of nuts. So yeah, that Georgia defense staff's kind of crazy. I mean, not to mention Will Muschamp is still going to be an analyst on the team, right? Kirby Smart was like in the opening interview was like, we're happy to announce that we're bringing on Travaris Robinson as defense coordinator. We're also emphatically happy that we were able to retain Will Muschamp in an analyst role on the team. That's nuts. So, I mean, got Trey Scott still on the team. I mean, that coaching staff's kind of nuts. But yeah, I think this was kind of like, was it an underrated hire? I mean, it shouldn't have been, but I feel like it wasn't talked about as much as it should have been because Glenn Schumann's still there, right?
Well, so much happened, right? Nick Saban retires, boom, bombshell, right? And then Robinson goes. I mean, people are like, is he gonna get the job? And there's not really ever gonna, that wasn't quite yet. Maybe one day for sure gonna be a really good head coach. But obviously in comes Kalen DeBoer. He goes to Georgia, and then all of a sudden there's like, wait a minute, is Robinson coming back? Obviously, Bama fans started like deleting tweets, taking back everything they were saying about Robinson leaving for Georgia, blah blah blah. Is Caleb Downs gonna come back? All this good stuff, and it kind of got, once he stayed at Georgia, the story kind of quieted down, and then obviously so much is happening every single day in college athletics, college football, like you said. Yeah, I mean, obviously, would Georgia have been fine without him? I'm sure. Glenn Schumann, very, very good, right? I mean, it's ridiculous that they even have him on as an analyst. But anyways, yeah, I think it's a is it game changing for Georgia? No, like I said, they'll be fine. But is it exciting and awesome and embarrassment of riches? Yeah, absolutely. And was Kirby smart to do this? Yeah, absolutely. And is it going to make them a better football team? Yeah, absolutely. I think these are all check the boxes of what makes Kirby Smart so good is he sees a weakness, he sees an area where he can improve, and if it hurts Alabama, it hurts Alabama, blah blah blah. But yeah, Tavares Robinson is a big, I think, a really really important piece for Georgia, and especially like not only now, but his recruiting prowess too is tremendous.
Yeah, he's yeah, when I first saw that, I was like, what? I was like, where's my first thought was like, I don't know why, because I was like, where's Glenn Schumann go? But then of course, he's hiring as a co-defensive coordinator, and I was like, oh yeah, because Will Muschamp stepped down. I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I know you talked about how this isn't necessarily a game changer. You're saying that because, well, I think because Georgia was going to be good regardless, but like
Yes.
on any other team, this is a game changer. I'm going to call it a game changer because I think if he was hired as a defensive coordinator to any other team, it's a game changer, right? I mean, just like if he gets hired to Texas A&M, if he gets hired back to Auburn, if he were to go to Kentucky, right? Like, any of these schools. I mean, Kentucky's an interesting example, but like Florida State or one of those, like it would have been game changing, right? Like I think it gets downplayed because it's Georgia. I'm like, is that crazy?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also like he's going to be like, yeah, that room. Could you imagine being like a GA for the defense and like doing something like just being able to sit in those meetings with Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart, Tavares Robinson, um, and obviously,
It's like
geez,
that. What was that that picture of like the LSU staff or whatever, or that video of
yeah,
the LSU staff and like when Nick Saban was the coach or whatever. Gosh,
it's Jimbo Fisher, it's Kirby Smart, like it's all Will Muschamp. Was he on that stat? Like it's a wild, wild grouping, and it's like, oh, look at all this, like, yeah, that's what it's gonna be one day, where it's like, here's the Georgia 2020 football team, here's the defensive staff, And Will Muschamp's just an analyst, but he's the most overqualified analyst in, all of college football.
One of them, Jerry Kill, being the most qualified.
Vandy legend.
Kidding, kind of. All right. Anyways, that's gonna do it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and thank you, Jacob, once again. Jacob from Greenwich, Connecticut. I don't know how to pronounce that, but spelled like Greenwich. So I'm just gonna go with that, and people who are from Greenwich can correct me on that. But thank you once again for your question that you submitted. If you guys want to reach out to us, our email is at the Redshirt Sophomore at gmail.com. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's at the Redshirt Soph. If you're watching on YouTube, it's going to be on the screen right here. If you're listening on Spotify, we love you too. Give us a follow and 5-star rating. But we also encourage you to come over to YouTube. Make sure you subscribe as well for more content coming out. CD's been absolutely pumping out shorts. Very interesting stuff about past quarterbacks. So make sure you guys stay tuned for more of that and other stuff. Of course, on YouTube. Make sure, of course, to like the video if you like the content. It's a very simple rule that we have here. But look, if you follow that rule, you're gonna have a good time. We're gonna have a good time. We're all gonna get through this thing together. We got 90. Oh gosh, because we're gonna be posting this tomorrow or the day after. So I'm just gonna say 90 some days until kickoff. I think 90 days was yesterday, so like maybe 88 days until college football kicks off. If you're gonna make it all the way to there, and you want to be there, and you want to be informed, and you're gonna be at the water cooler, right? Make sure you're hanging out with us because we do not sit out. CD, you got anything for us on the way out?
Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. We're back. We'll be pumping out content. Like Matthew said, we love um wow, I'm just not working today. Um the mailbag questions. Thank you. Shout out to Jacob. That was an awesome question. We had a lot of fun with this. If you've got other specific questions, obviously feel free to hit us up anywhere and we'd love to talk into it, obviously.
Absolutely. And we'll see y'all in the next one.